Welcome back to the Political Podcast for another interview today. Today I'm joined by Richard Riordan, the member for Polwarth. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, fellas. Thanks for the invite.
So for the audience out there, many of them probably wouldn't know who you are, sadly. If you could give us a little brief description of who you are before we get into the questions, that would be very much appreciated.
Right. So I'm Richard. I'm the state member for Polwarth, and Polwarth is the best electorate in the Victorian Parliament. It's one of the oldest. It stretches along the Great Victorian coastline from Torquay to just past the 12 Apostles to a little township called Peterborough, up north along the Mount Emu Creek, all the way to almost Skipton, and then across east and meanders back down around the outskirts of Geelong and back to Torquay. And the main town in the middle is the beautiful Colac, where I live and born and bred and ran a business for many years. And also, smack bang in the middle of my electorate, not only do we have the best coastline in the world with the Great Ocean Road, but we also have Australia's largest naturally occurring permanent lakes. So Lakes Corangamite, Colac and others, smack bang in the middle, the heart of the electorate. That's my background. So, and at a personal level, married with 4 almost adult children, and have lived all my life in Colac.
Great. We'll now get started with our questions. I have the first question. So can you talk a bit about your experiences during your time in Canada? Because I believe you did your year 12 there, didn't you?
Yes, look at the research. Nothing Google doesn't tell you. Yes, I did in fact. And the interesting thing about my 12 months in Canada, I had never seen snow before and had never really spent a night away from Colac, I don't think, until that year.
Where'd you go in Canada?
I came home from school one day and I had a student who'd come back from a Rotary exchange and said, I think I want to do that. I was 14 and a half, turning 15 at the time. My mother thought I was mad, and because I was the eldest and generally fairly well behaved, she said, oh, okay. Anyway, fast forward 6-7 months later, I was landing in a plane in Calgary, who just hosted the 1988 Winter Olympics. And fortunately for me, I had a fantastic experience. One of the families I stayed with were the political organisers for the Conservative Party of Alberta, which was right up my alley. They couldn't believe this kid that was just flat out keen, and it was an election year, super exciting, loved that. I stayed with the president of an oil company who owned the hydroelectric plant at the base of Niagara Falls, and I got to go into somewhere where no one would ever get to go. I stayed with an agricultural scientist who took me to a convention on farming north of the Arctic Circle, which was totally weird in the middle of February and inches thick of snow. But so I've managed to keep in contact with all those people from all that time ago. Really important part of my journey to politics, because you learn to engage with lots of different people, think quickly on your feet, be prepared to talk publicly. But the other good fortune I had was the other students at the time. One became the finance minister of Finland, one is a major New Zealand radio personality, another is arguably in the top 5 most famous Bollywood stars, and is the King of India when it comes to movies. Is the only Indian Bollywood star to make major hits in all 5 major languages of India. And a very successful South African banker. So all those people I keep in regular contact with. Interestingly, we've all been relatively successful in our chosen careers, and it was a great part of my life, and one I'd always recommend to other young people.
Was that just an easy process to enter the Rotary Scholarship, or you had to do a lot of applications to get in?
No, it's quite a rigorous process, and it all took a series of interviews and all sorts of things along the journey, and you had to get selected. But it's about a 8 or 9 month process that they put you through. But just one other follow up from that, I was then selected in my mid-30s by Rotary again for a young professionals scholarship, and I went to Siberia. And most people think when I say I went to Siberia for a few months, I was in trouble and gone to jail, but that wasn't the case. I I went in the year of 2007, which historians are now writing as the freest year Russia had ever experienced in its 1,000-year history. And I think, from what I see on the TV and the way poor old Mr. Putin is destroying the country, I suspect it possibly was.
Yeah.
Long answer.
Good answer. So we'll now get into our second question.
Yeah.
This is, again, probably related a little bit more as well to your high school
Yeah.
life.
How was your high school and university life? Do you have any memorable moments?
Well, my high school life was probably like you guys. I'd probably, if cameras were that small when I was at school, I'd have probably been doing stuff like this. But when I was at high school, we did get a video recorder, and it was about this big, and needed 45,000 PowerPoints, and making videos was not really that easily. So look, I loved school. I really was highly engaged in it. I was involved in all levels of my school, and school councils and all those sorts of things. One thing, I don't know whether in your research, but I'm a mad gardener, and
I think I saw that on your Instagram.
yeah, I used to drive my principal crazy because I obsessed about the tidiness of the school, which is a really good thing to do. But in the end, the principal put me in control of organising working bees and things, and I remember getting all the football goalposts painted in school colours, and getting fences pulled down and doing all sorts of weird things because it visually offended me no end to go to an ugly school. So, and I was at a very simple country school, and there wasn't a lot of money around, and so I conned my father and other people into paying to get things done and whatever. So that was my school. I loved it. Early political machinations, perhaps. When I came to Melbourne, I went to Monash University, which was a great experience. Not like university today, where no one seems to go to classes anymore. You sit at home on your bed and look at YouTube clips. When I was there, actually, you had to turn up to class. And it was an exciting time because I'd never been to such a big place. I'd gone to a small country school. So that was really good. And that's when I signed up on about day 2 to the Liberal Party, and have been a member ever since.
Yeah. Any memorable moments though, or?
From actual learning at uni, not necessarily, but it's worth noting that 1992 to 1996, politics was on the other foot to when it was now. The Liberal Party was in the ascendancy. Jeff Kennett won after years of behind. That was an exciting time, and then John Howard came to power, shortly after. And in between that, we had the famous election that we should never have lost, which was the John Hewson GST. And I still have all my full collection of fight back books, huge documents, which is a political lesson in itself.
Is this with the Lego underneath your house?
No, they'll be in the roof actually. I have 2 pieces of great political history. One was in the mid-80s. There was a massive nurses' strike, and I must have only been in year 9 or 10, and I went out with a friend in the middle of the night and cut down all the protest signs and took them home, and I've still got those in the roof somewhere. And then I also have my fight back book collection. And for those that don't know what fight back is, it was always argued that opposition should have detailed policies before you go to election. And John Hewson was the Liberal leader at the time, should have won the election. Labor had been in for a long time, and he put a manifesto together called Fight Back. It was a series of big white books, and he got beaten. And it was always written that he got beaten because he had too much detail, and the whole election campaign was fighting on the opposition's detail.
And there was one famous interview as well.
The birthday cake and candles, yes. Well done, you've been very good, Francis, well done. So for your listeners that don't know, in the olden days, they used to have talkback TV at night after the 6 o'clock news. Famous interviewer called Mark Willesee, and they often credit the loss of that election to a person trying to explain his policy on putting cakes on a birthday cake. And I think it is the technical political definition of a train wreck interview. One that all aspiring politicians ever since will always avoid. And I must say, whenever we have conversations about putting ideas forward, you run it past the birthday cake candle test.
Always got to make sure you don't want to have a tragic interview like that.
No, this one's going very well. We better keep it that way. Don't ask anything too tricky.
All right then. Now, our third question. Could you talk about your experience being a managing director of a family-run retail and supply company?
Yes, well, I loved it. I was very lucky, I think. I left, once again, getting back to the time when I left school, we had the recession we had to have. There were literally no jobs. Youth unemployment was 20-30%. Standard unemployment was just on 10%. So can you imagine the economy with 10% of the population unemployed? And
Completely different to what it is
interest
now.
rates were 17%, right? Interest rates are 17%, 10% of the population not at work, and if you were under the age of 20, you basically had no hope of the job. And luckily, you could buy a house in parts of Melbourne for under $100,000. So I came back and worked with my dad, and I loved every year of it. We didn't fight very much, which was good. And so, yes, I worked in my family business for 30 odd years, I think, roughly, or thereabouts. And so that was a country business. We grew it a bit over that time, and it was a good experience. Good for politics.
Good learning curve. For
Good learning curve. And I make the observation that when you, for any of your viewers that are involved in family businesses, being in politics is a lot like a family business. Sometimes you want to kill the people around you, but you have to wake up the next day and all be best friends and get on with it and make the best of it. And so for me, it's not very different. Do you want to stop?
Yeah, we've stopped.
Do you want to stop that for a
Yeah.
second?
Okay. Do you want to continue on from what you were saying, or we can go on to a...
Well, it's on family business?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so that's all. Family business, good start for politics.
Yeah. So now we'll go on to our fourth question, relating a bit more towards your time as a board member at the Colac Area Health. I think, George, you have this question.
Right. So, how was it being a board member of Colac Area Health and Coronamide Catchment Authority?
Okay, so there's a good story, a good political story there. So I came to those placements after the year 2000. I think Colac Area Health I could have been late 1999 or thereabouts. No, it was late 1999. It was just, I was appointed when Jeff Kennett was still in government.
Just before the election.
It must have been one of the last lot of appointments they made before the election, which everyone thought at the time they were going to win. I was appointed to the hospital board, and a few years later I got appointed to the Coronamide Catchment. But something I don't know whether you have touched on, but I ran for pre-selection first in 1999 for Parliament. You missed that, so your research was not perfect.
I mean, we only started researching last night.
So my predecessor was the finance minister in the Kennett years, called Ian Smith. And Ian ran into a spot of bother with his personal life in 1999 and ended up resigning. And there was a pre-selection which I ran for, and I think it would have been the grand age of 24, 25, something like that. And I was resoundly beaten, although I do claim to have come second out of 5, but nonetheless the guy that won, who I then took over from, definitely won. But the good advice I received at the time was, at 24 or 25 in my electorate, I was deemed to look younger than you guys look, and a whippersnapper who couldn't possibly represent an electorate like mine. And the advice I was given was go back out, enjoy your work, enjoy your family, and get as involved in your community as you can and get lots of experience. Best advice I ever have. I did that to a T, and then when the fellow that beat me then retired in 2015, I was ready to go, and so had done the necessary things you need to do to get elected.
Done your due diligence,
Or
basically.
done my prep work. I was not going to get beaten a second time.
If you were, I mean, if you did get beaten, would you probably want to run again, or
If I didn't get pre-selected, no, because you wouldn't.
you wouldn't have waited again until?
No, not until I was 65. No. I'd have to hang up my boots, my political aspiration. Well, I got elected at 45. It was a good age.
Right in that sweet spot between having a look.
Being old and new, but have
Exactly.
some experience. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get on now to our fifth question. Tobias.
On your page, it talks about your involvement with numerous sport clubs. Could you talk about your connection with these clubs and your experience working with these clubs?
Yeah, so the hospital board and White catchment consumed a lot of my spare time. I worked in a retail family business, so I was working pretty much 7 days a week, so you don't have a lot of spare time. So my conscious choices they were my two big commitments, and most of that time was hospital. It was only 6 years at the White catchment, but 15, 16 years on the hospital board. So that was my main focus. The other clubs I joined, I wasn't there to take them over or rule them. I just felt an obligation, usually because my kids were involved, so it was just being an active, engaged parent. But politicians are notorious for probably always having an opinion on things and being out front, so you inevitably get some jobs. My football club career has always been looking after the gate and charging people to get in. I think it's practice for taxation. And then when I was with my various school involved with the kids, just sporting clubs and things like that. But they are all good things to do if you want to be a member of Parliament, because it helps you learn to deal with people. You see people coming to community problems with very different perspectives, and ones you have to respect and take note of. And if you perhaps don't agree with them or think they're wrong, you have to learn good skills at how you can either change people's minds or bring them along with you, or in fact, how do you compromise and change to get the best outcome. So it's good practice, good training.
Yeah, because in politics, of course, you don't know who you're going to meet when you go into Parliament.
No.
So it's important to really get used to dealing with different types of people, even though you're going to meet people that you probably don't want to see every day, but you probably see them every day in Parliament. You
do, and everyone comes to their point of view through their own experiences, their own knowledge, and you have to respect that, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll now move on to the next question. George?
So, who would you say is a political role model or idol, and what made you specifically join the Liberal Party and run for Parliament?
Well, I specifically joined the Liberal Party because I was just always a political tragic, and I just signed up as soon as I could. And I went all the way through school with this girl who was a mad, screaming lefty socialist. And from about grade 5 onwards, she had that point of view and I had that point of view, and we always disagreed on everything. So I probably behaved or developed liberal thoughts and ideas well before I knew I was a liberal. It's just I knew I always disagreed with that girl across the other side of the room, and she probably thought exactly the same as me, because she's now some big trade union lefty. So be it. We all end up with our points of view.
Do you still talk to her, or?
Well, I do occasionally run into her, and a couple of her siblings also are in the political field, and I come across them occasionally. Yes. So, but they were pretty hardcore lefties. But look, that was okay. I always liked having the robust discussions. What was the second part to the question?
Well, who was your political role model?
The role model, yes.
And
so look,
also why you ran for Parliament.
So I ran for Parliament because I just always wanted to, and I didn't realise this until after I'd been pre-selected and had a chance to run. But my great-grandfather ran for Labor in my seat exactly 100 years before me. So in 1915, just after the war started, and I came elected in 2015. And I always knew he was a Labor Party man, and he was very politically active in my community. But his claim to fame that I since uncovered was the famous speech given by Andrew Fisher just before he became Prime Minister, to the last penny and the last shilling, we all support the war, or whatever the exact wording is. I know it's got the shilling and the pinks in it, or pounds.
Before Australian dollars.
Sorry, before Australian dollars. Was given in Colac in my hometown, and that Labor Party meeting, town meeting, was in part organised by my great-grandfather. There's a bluestone memorial to that, not to my grandfather, but to that speech, which was then Labor won that election, and Australia was committed to World War I. So there's always been a bit of politics in the family, so but not always liberal politics. My role models in politics are politicians that have conviction and values and are inherently faithful to what they believe in. So they don't necessarily have to be on my side of politics. Contemporarily, I do like Jeff Kennett and I do like John Howard, even though those two didn't really like each other. But for me, those guys both displayed a similar trait, was you knew what they believed. They never left you in doubt. I don't necessarily want the world to know this, but I have some admiration for Daniel Andrews, not for anything other than the fact that he did the same thing. Like you might loathe him, you might detest him, you might hate everything he says. You might hate what golf clubs he wants to join. However, what I think his essential ingredient to success was his team, the people that he relied on to support him, always knew what he was going to do, and certainly someone sitting opposite him in the chamber, you could go, well, this is how the guy's going to react. You could guess what he was going to do, and he used that as a powerful weapon, as did Howard, as did Jeff Kennett. Interestingly, Andrews beat them both because he decided to retire before people pushed him. Not that he was close to getting pushed at the moment, but they say you're always best if you get out. What is it? You get out when others are wanting you to stay. That's the right time to go. So there's sort of three different types of leaders that I think to some degree you get inspiration from. And my final one that really gives me a lot of inspiration in the way I might think about things, and that's of course Nelson Mandela, which sometimes I feel a bit cliched about, but particularly when we look at world politics today, it's my view. I often say I'm a lover, not a fighter. The concept of revenge and getting back at groups or people and squaring up, that it's not something I like. And so I look at Nelson Mandela and I look at the rest of Africa and I go, sadly, South Africa has deteriorated in my mind in more recent times with very different political leadership. But when you look at a typical country leaving colonialism, as South Africa did, it was way more successful because of that political leadership, which was let bygones be bygones, where we've got to move forward together. And I think there's no shortage of examples where that would be a better outcome around the world today. So there you go. Four different ones.
And all across the political spectrum as well.
All across the political spectrum. So as I said, it's not about the side they're on, but those intrinsic political skills that you need. Because there's political success on all sides of the spectrum.
Exactly. And you'd also say Dan Andrews was a pretty good political warrior. That's what I've heard. Like,
Absolutely. The best warrior. Hated the fact he was on their side because he was good at it.
All right. Well, now
Thank God he's gone.
Jacinta a little bit easier to deal
Sorry?
with. Jacinta.
No, look, Jacinta's similar. I mean, Labor in Victoria is a well-organised machine. There's so much wrong with it. Like, I don't... Victoria, the machinery of government, the bureaucracy, those that rely on government, in many ways act in fear because of that. There are things that should and could be happening that aren't. So there's lots wrong with it, but in terms of just pure politics, how you play politics, when you try and understand how you motivate people, inspire people, bring people along, I can be as angry and disappointed as I like with the government, which I am quite often on a regular basis. However, we have to sit back objectively and go, well, it has been successful. If you judge success by voter numbers, electoral results.
Sadly, yeah, for the Labor Party in that sense.
Sadly for us.
Sadly for us.
Very happy for the Labor Party.
Okay, we'll move on to now the final question. So finally, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are starting university or high school?
Well, asking me to give only one piece of advice
I mean,
is not very fair. Okay, this is the advice, and I'd be giving this to my kids too, similar age to you guys. The first thing I would say is that the world in the world today, we're standing here, we've all got a phone in our hand, and that phone now is finely tuned to your personal preferences. And the challenge I put out to everyone is, it's great, I absolutely love when someone has an opinion on something. Even if I absolutely hate your opinion, the fact that you've got an opinion appeals to me. But people are having less and less opinions, and people are having less and less understanding because they're only getting their information through that. And I always challenge people to actively go and find the other side of the opinion before you make up your mind. So that's one piece of advice, and I think that's the lack of knowledge and understanding on really important issues disturbs me, so I'd say that. In terms of advice for young people and going forward in your life, it would be about not to necessarily get sucked into the narratives of the day. The world has become increasingly single interest group focused, so we're all obsessed about gender, we're obsessed about climate change, there's all these big issues, and we talked earlier and you guys identified all of those, so I'm thinking, so tell me, how does the gender thing make any difference to your life? Like, when was, I just don't understand why we pigeonhole, I call it tick box society. Are you, what gender are you, what nationality are you, what language group do you speak, what, tick, 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 tick. Why does it matter? I don't understand. My view of society is, if someone needs help or assistance, or care, or an education, or whatever it might be, then it's based on their merits. If you need it, you need it. If you don't need it, look after yourself. Pretty simple. And increasingly, and that's one of the great hates I have of what we've seen in Victoria, is, and the government did it again today, oh, we've got 66% of people in Parliament are women. Who cares? I can't think anyone, there's just no electoral evidence that anyone cares about that, ultimately. It's good to have gender balance, it's good to have multicultural ones. They are great things to have, but the benefit of them are inherent in better. A government will be better with more diversity because it'll have a better spread of ideas, it'll provide better, it'll appeal to more people. It's not something that you have to pigeonhole. We don't have to have, all these days celebrating all these things. Like, it's just lost on me. Just celebrate the fact you're healthy and well and can get up. Like, that's something we should all celebrate. I'm just not sure. Identity politics, they call it, and I'm over it. I think a lot of people are over it. I don't think it matters. I think it's just designed to divide people and get one lot of group of people angry with another group of people. It doesn't serve a purpose. I mean, I couldn't care two hoots. If my kids come home tomorrow and want to be a koala, well, good. Just don't get too hot in that ridiculous suit, is what I'd say to them. I just don't think it matters. And so that's my advice. People should keep their open mind, keep their views open, not just be ready to judge, jam stuff down people's throats and get on. But people be people. Kids be kids, people be people.
The people develop their own views in their own way, don't push it onto them, basically.
Yep. We don't need to have everyone walking around too scared and too guilted into doing things.
Exactly. Yeah.
There you go.
Alright, that's
the gospel according to me.
I mean, you should write something in the gospel in the Bible, like a little Richard Riordian section.
The little section at the end.
Yeah.
I couldn't write that small. You gotta write that small.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Gospel of Richard.
Sorry?
You know,
The gospel of Richard.
Yeah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Richard.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are all our questions. I'd like to thank again Richard Riordan for giving us the time to answer the questions and talk to us. Thank you again.
No worries. Thanks, boys.